Welcome to Straight Talk with your host, Patti Foster.
The Holocaust Museum, why don't you, I don't know if that would be interested, how the Holocaust Museum has founded. We had one guy that was called the founder. But by being the founder is not enough. To be a founder, you have to have seed money. And so we got together 10 people. And the 10 people had donated, each one of them, $5,000 or more. And one of them was my husband. That was Ozzy. There was 10 people that were donated that. And that's how the Holocaust Museum had got started.
What year was that?
In 1982 or earlier. I do not know that for sure 82 because I attended a convention in Washington, D.C., and I was there when they broke the ground for Washington, D.C. Museum.
What was that like?
It was very, very, that was in 1982. The ground was broken because I have a hat, and it says 1982. You want to see it?
Sure.
Hold on.
When you were with the students on the campus at SMU, what did you share with them?
I do not remember too much what I talked about. I talked more about my trip into Auschwitz. That's what we were talking about, the train and how they came into Germany, how they came into Romania, and how they put us on the train and carried us out for 3 days and 4 days and 4 nights. They carried us out to Auschwitz. And when I got into Auschwitz, I had long hair. I had ponytails, you could sit down. 2 tails. In fact, I have a picture of the 2 tails, ponytails. And my grandmother looked at me and she said, we arrived around 10 o'clock in the morning. It was a very nice sunny day. I thought so. Anyway, I looked out through the windows, and on one side a band was playing. On the other side, the gypsies were performing. And they had given us a reception you would not believe it. I've been to lots of resort areas, but you don't get receptions like that. It was a beautiful reception. And my grandmother looked through the window and she says to me, I didn't comb your hair for 5 days. I like to comb your hair. I have a little time. Later, I will have to help you mother the children. And I said, okay, Grandma. And I turned loose my hair, and I didn't finish turning it loose when the door opened up. And the door opened up. We have gathered all the waste from the body in pots and pans. They told us to carry pots and pans that we'll need for cooking, but we didn't need them for cooking. The trains that we were on was kettle trains, and there was no water, and there was no toilets, and everything was gathered in the pots. And the same train that I traveled, a woman gave birth to triplings. And it was 130 people in the train. 2 people had died, and there was a woman with triplings, and my grandmother wanted to comb my hair. And I said, okay, Grandma. And the door opened up, and when the door opened up, everybody pushed. And my hair started floating in every direction, and I looked at my grandmother and I said, Grandma, I cannot walk like this. What should I do? She says, find a rope and tie your hair up. That was the last conversation I had with my grandmother. And I went back in the train where she sent me. I went back because I remember the woman with the 3 kids, babies. I got up, and in the top, I looked up and I saw my mother by a block away from me. I screamed. She had 1 baby on one side, 1 baby on the other side. And when I screamed, she turned her head. I believe she heard me, but I never saw her anymore after that. That's the last time I saw her. And I was trying to come down. When I came, a little bus came and parked itself right in the front walkway. I couldn't go down. And they took the two corpses. They opened the little bus, you can call it a little ambulance, was filled up with corpses. And when they opened up the thing, it was corpses. It took the woman with the 3 babies and pushed her in the top of the corpses. That had confused me very bad. It's the first time I ever saw 3 newborn babies pushed on dead bodies. It was a very, very unusual scene. I became bizarre. I became unconscious. I don't remember what I did after it. I just browsed around. But I remembered one thing when my mother went in. And I walked around. I didn't keep time anymore. I lost time. And I was going toward the place where my mother walked in. And suddenly I heard lots of doors have closed. Boom! Several doors closed at one time. And I was reaching with my arm to get inside, and I couldn't go in. And when I couldn't go in, I heard older people mumbling. I didn't know what, and everything became silent. Even the Germans became silent for a second. Everybody became silent. I couldn't understand what has happened. And then Mengele came up to me and he says, "You are chosen to go to work." And I looked at him and I said, No, I want to go to my mother. He says, "No, you are chosen to go to work." I couldn't go in the crematorium. God locked it before my eyes. I was on the outside of the crematorium when the people were burned, cremated, gassed. Right in the front. Nothing, you couldn't hear nothing. Now later I asked the rabbi again, what are the people were saying so silently? And they were saying, Buradai Emes in Hebrew. What it means in English, God, even in death, you are righteous. And Mengele had, you are chosen to go to work. So he sent me into the working group. I turned around and I came back and tried the door again. That's when I got beaten up. I got beaten up there to death. He didn't let me for life. I was completely dead on the floor. Broke my head, got broken, and I don't have hair on this side because of that. And he left me for that, and I picked myself up, and I just went into the working group, bleeding all over myself, and I said, I have to give up. I find my mother later. Who would ever thought what I have? Well, I was there for a few minutes, and I went into work. I was put in block 29, Zeelager, and I was there for. When I arrived there, a woman kept a speech. She had a speech. She was a very intelligent woman. She was a lawyer. I find out later that she was an attorney. She tried to relay something to us, but I was too young to understand. All I understood out of her whole conversation was, when you're sick, you're not sick. It kind of turned my head. Why is she saying when you're sick, you're not sick? What is she trying to tell us? She had a message, but the message, what is the message? For me to figure out, 15 years old, what is when you're sick, you're not sick? I couldn't understand it. And every time I kind of thought about this, I kind of thought, what is she trying to say with that? What is she trying to... She's trying to say something, and we don't understand. I asked several people, nobody. She just They looked at me, I asked intelligent people, they just looked at me kind of like, what in the hell do you want? You're sick, you're not sick. What is they trying to find out? And well, the thing is, it was from this woman that she had it in the speech, and I couldn't get it out of my head. The whole speech, nothing except this. I find out what it meant. When you're sick, you're not sick. It meant if you're not sick, don't pretend to be sick. You keep on working, keep on doing things. Don't pretend, because sometimes when you work yourself in where you're sick, you can be taken in some place you shouldn't. Because later after that, I broke out with impetigus. Impetigus is a rash on your body, and it comes from uncleanliness. And I broke out with impetigus, and I was taken into the hospital. I was there for about 5 days. When the 5th day, we called Blocksperre. It's a German word. It means curfew over the whole camp. And I was in the hospital. In the front, it was a beautiful hospital. In the back, just like I came in this hospital, being 15, a lot of women came in that were pregnant and was giving birth to babies. And the babies didn't have a chance. The woman did, but not the babies. And all the babies were born there was breech birth. Let's leave it breech birth. Who will be interested to find out, they can look at that, find out what breech birth means. I do not want to explain it. All the babies were born breech birth. It was a horrible way of seeing life for itself. And I was there 5 days. Sudden, they called curfew, and the little car started coming in and carrying all the people out. And nobody was allowed to go no place, and they will carry him out. And I never slept in the bottom part of the bed. We were sleeping in beds like 14 in the bottom, 15 in the middle, and by 13 in the top. And I always went up to the top one, because I was there for about 3-4 days when the bed broke, and the woman in the bottom got killed. And I never I never went into the bottom part. I always went up to the top. And so I was, even here in the hospital, I went up to the top. I was in the top thing. They came and picked up the people from the bottom, and then we had over 1,500 people in this hospital. And some of them were sick, some of them were not sick. Some of them were my sister and brothers, 2 sisters. They came because the sister was sick, the other sister came. She got caught into the same thing. Took them into the crematorium, because that's what the relocation was, taken into the crematorium. And they were not too gentle with the people. They just threw them in very roughly and everything. And first they picked up the bottom one. Then they picked up the middle ones. Then they picked up the top one. And I didn't want in a hurry to come down. And I used to have Hollander shoes, wooden shoes. It was very hard to walk in them. But I always carried them under my arm, because I used to add up in places that you had to have it. The rocks, too many rocks, and you had to put the shoes on. I looked at my shoes and I said, you don't need the shoes no more. You're going to death. I reconciled, I'm going to death. And I said, I left the shoes up on the top. And I slowly walked down. And as I got into the middle of the bed, as I was coming down, I didn't see nobody, no place. I was completely by myself. So I finally put my foot down to the bottom, very slow, not in a hurry, very comfortable, very slow, and I fell in a puddle of water. Don't ask, I don't know. And there was enough opening in the bottom part for me to scoot in the middle of the bed. In the bottom, not in the bed, under the bed. And I got into that muddy area, and I just laid down. And when I got in the middle, I said, now you're not moving from here. If we want you, we have to drag you out because you're not moving. I took a stand. You stay right here. And I remained right there. They came, they poured chlorine all over us, all over the bed to clean them. They poured, disinfected it, and they screamed and hollered. And each time chlorine came on my burning body because I was naked almost and full of rash and sores, I had water and I was washing myself up. Finally, they closed the barrack, and I remained in that bed. When I remained in that bed, I was very scared. I pulled something I didn't know is it right or wrong, or what did I do, but I knew I didn't want to go into the crematorium. So we already knew it's crematoriums and what they taking people. If they took 1,500, we knew they taking them to death. They took 200, 300, that was okay, but it took less, more, it was bad. And so I was scared. And I suddenly thought about my grandmother. My grandmother was a very, very orthodox woman. And she did penance to God. How did she do penance to God? She fasted twice a week. And that's how she paid God the penance. That's how she repaid God for helping her. In the last war, her husband got killed or whatever happened, he was not alive. And she had 6 daughters and she married them all off. And for that, she did penance. She fasted twice a week, paying to God. And we kids already knew about this by her fasting, and so we never bothered her. But then one day she fasted Wednesday. So I said, Grandma, why are you fasting Wednesday? What's going on? And she says, I had a horrible dream, Rosa, because she liked me very much. I was named after her mother. My name was after my grandmother was her mother. And she says, Rose, I had a horrible dream. I said, what was your dream? So bad that you have to fast. I dreamed that God had pulled a black curtain on the skies, not to see the pains that the people are going through. And I said, you know, God, it's time for you to make punch in that holes in that curtain and take a look what's going on, because it's just too much. I was arguing with God. I said, punch holes in it and take a look. And with that, I fell asleep. Next morning, I woke up. Finally, I woke up, and I heard voices. I heard a nurse. What they had done, they took the nurses and the doctors and saved them in another place. Then they brought them back once it cleared the shot. They brought the nurses and the doctors back, and I heard what the nurse said to somebody asked, what are the people from here? He said, they were relocated to another hospital. That's what the nurse told the people. And I knew that was my time to come out because I had to re-register. I was already off the list, and I had to re-register. And so I came out. I was full of mud and dirty and filthy, and I can imagine. And the nurse looked at me and she says, are you one from last night? And I said, uh-huh, I am. She says, come with me. She took me with her. She took me by a block and a half. Longest walk I ever did. I didn't know where she's taking me, what she's going to do with me, how it got me to the front of the hospital. She took a bowl and poured water in it and gave me a rag and a towel, and she says, wash up. I looked at her, I said, what? She says, wash up, clean up, and gave me a clean dress. And she became an I washed up and I cleaned up. I put on the clean dress. And she said, one thing I ask of you, do not ever repeat what happened here. I said, okay. I thought, who was going to even listen to me? It's nothing. I said, okay, laughing at. But she became my biggest mentor. She took care of me for about 2 weeks. She put lotion on me. She cured my impetigus. She cleaned me. She showed me how to take care. I never listened to anybody. Till her, I didn't listen to anybody. I had 5 brothers. I didn't have any sisters, so my grandmother had to do everything. Finally, I listened very careful, everything, and if she didn't say the words right, I told her to please repeat it, forgive me, repeat it. And after 2 weeks, she comes in with 2 dresses. And she says to me, throw that dress down you have on, put a clean dress on, and go out of here. And you have to promise one thing, don't ever come back here again. And never come back to see me again. You cannot see me no more. You have to say goodbye. She says, you are a survivor. That's the first time I got acquainted with the word survivor. I never heard it before. She says, you are a survivor. Survive and live. And here I am telling the story.
Passing along the story. You said, people teach their kids how to take things, but they don't teach their kids how to give.
People teach children how to receive, but not how to give back. And that's another thing to take out time to teach how to give to. That's missing from everybody. You know, I find that in a lot of American people, they do not know how to give. They know how to take, but not how to give. And that's something they're going to have to learn how to give. It's very important.
As we close up, tell us one thing that you loved so much about Ozzy.
Oh, my husband, he was the greatest man that ever lived on the earth. I still every morning say, good morning, honey. I still talk to him. He's gone, but I know that somewhere he maybe hear me. But he doesn't hear me, it's okay too. But I do talk to him like he would be right here with me because I love him very much. It's 4 years later, and I'm still in love with my own husband because I loved him from the first minute I saw him till he died. That's the only thing I can say. He was the greatest man that ever lived. He never saw bad in nobody. He always saw the good. When he used to say, oh, don't say that she doesn't. Let her first find out what it is before you make judgment on anything. He never saw bad on nobody. He always saw the good part. He never wanted to see bad. He was a great guy. There's very little I can say more. And it's a shame that he's gone before me, but he had to go. There was no choice. He had cancer and he left. There was nothing I could do to stop it. I did what I could and that was it. He was a great guy.
Thanks for listening to Straight Talk with your host, Patti Foster. Patti is a motivational speaker, writer, musician, and has an amazing testimony of God's faithfulness. For more information, log on to www.pattifoster.com.